Welcome to the Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Neil, 10th Man, Righteous Force, Refracted Curvature, Brian's Logic, Eli, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Morning, morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hello, good to have you all. Welcome to the live show, audience members. Feel free to join in with the housekeeping questions in the chat. Any evidence that you can have a curved adjacent whilst acquiring an elevation angle?
Impossible.
No, you cannot. It's a right angle triangle. No, it doesn't work with curves.
Yeah, indeed.
Dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun.
So check out Sleeping Warrior's latest video where he's addressing Ruhif directly in regards to this minor problem where they have to assume a flat Earth in order to acquire any angles of measurement, sextant or otherwise. Now, after that measurement being acquired, they can beg the question of a sphere Earth and put that angle that was measured at the surface at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth, but they'll need a geometric horizon for that. And they'll have to justify how they actually got the angle measurement in the first place, because you'll need a flat plane for that. So it's an absolute annihilation of the globe Earth, and it's a stone cold flat Earth proof because it only works on a flat plane. Triangulation kills the globe and proves it's flat. Any evidence of a physical geometric spheroid horizon formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
Not since the Black Swan, no.
If you are watching this live, please share the show. This is the cutting edge of flat Earth. If you've got a family member that you think needs converting, and you want to ruin their day by showing them stone cold proof that we're not on a sphere and we are, in fact, inhabitants of a flat plane, then send them the show. Let them listen to the first 10 minutes of this housekeeping. Any evidence that we can have gas pressure without a container?
No, impossible. I want to go back to the last question, though. So the most of the Western world is taught that the Earth is a sphere with curvature, with a radius, and yet there's no physical signs of this curvature. Why are they still believing this? What's causing the blindness?
The same principle applies. So when I say please share the show, it's because the Earth curve horizon that was formerly understood to be a limitation to your view based on Earth curve mathematics and geometry has been debunked by an argument called the Black Swan. If the Earth was a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, then every distance measurement to the horizon could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, and we have imagery that shows the horizon beyond the geometric limitations of an Earth sphere radius 3959. Therefore, the Earth is not a sphere, and the horizon is not Earth curvature. So share the show so people are aware of this fact. We're not living on a sphere.
So
Earth is flat.
So why would that ruin their day or their life? I don't get that remark.
Because in Normie land, your general Joe doesn't appreciate that the horizon isn't Earth curve. He's under the misapprehension that it is. And if you take that away from Normie in Matrix society, then that might leave them in a position where they have to question other things in their normal day-to-day lives. And now that is something that most people do not want to trouble themselves with, Neil.
Yeah, but you can't play God, Nathan. You got to listen. You can't do that.
I can't do that, but I can ask the people watching live to do it. Please share the show.
I don't think that's what he's doing, Neil. I think what Nathan is saying is that if someone said to someone else, hey, you know, they totally took advantage of me at that shop, he's going to say, yeah, you think you got a whopper of story. When I took my car in, this is how much I got taken in for. On an everyday thing that people realize sometimes there's bad mechanics. However, when you wake them up and say the earth is not a sphere, it's like, wait a minute. What else have they lied to me about? It's going to ruin their day.
Yeah, you start questioning
Did
things
it
that
ruin
are
your
taken as read. So where in some parts of society there is a tacit acceptance that the news lies to you, whereas in other parts of society that's absolutely outrageous. If it's dedicated to tape and broadcast, it cannot be anything other than the stone cold truth. Facts as they are reported. How dare you? Well, that's the level we're talking about, but on a much bigger and wider scale, because you're talking about a paradigm shift in terms of the nature of the reality that you're actually faced with. A huge paradigm shift, and convincing people they've been lied to on that scale is very, very difficult. Now, if you present this information to them and demonstrate how we don't have a sphere Earth edge horizon, and that we don't have an Earth sphere radius 3959 because we'd be able to measure a geometry as asserted, and we can't, we've debunked it, then that might ruin their day, because they say, well, if everybody on the news and everybody in government claims we're on a sphere and that is the understanding, then they're capable of lying to me about basically anything.
I think I understand your point, because one day my brother was over my house, the brother that really got me into this, by saying, you still think the earth is a sphere? And he showed me all the information. He kind of said to my family, yeah, that's my fault. I should have never done that.
Maybe. I mean, Mark Sargent's rule, you only talk about flat Earth. You don't talk about it. You know, don't talk about it ever. That's his basic rule, like Fight Club. Don't talk about it. Well, yeah, I can kind of understand a section of logic that says to me that that's correct. You know, there's no point spoiling people's day over this. But there's another part of my brain that says you're a YouTuber and you need to put food on the table, so please show the show. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
That's a silly, illogical question.
Didn't cover gas.
I'm going to need half of that.
You are going to need, I was just waiting for it. You are
It's
going to
not
need
that
half of that. You need
It's a
the
good-
Earth curve geometry debunked in the most previous question, if you ignore gas pressure without a container, which we'll come back to. Go ahead, Neil.
No, it was me.
Oh, sorry, Ted.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question because it applies to what the secondary premise, if you believe in the sphere, that there's this molten iron core. So it's a good follow-up question, because if the first one gets them to doubt because Black Swan, then they say, well, you know what else they say? And then you bring up the molten iron core, and it's like, wait a minute. The first one's not there, the second one's not there. Yeah, exactly. Let's go one step at a time.
I guess it's silly when you know reality, then it's a silly question. So, retract it.
Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
You're gonna need a container for that.
You're right, Arwin.
How many?
Multiple, in some cases.
At least 2.
But for your car, 4.
Oh, forget about my car. I don't want to get into that. But that's the one that's getting through to my son. That one right there.
Can't have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon. That's how it's defined. The force exerted on the walls of the container is gas pressure. So you're going to need containment. The assertion that we have an infinitely available space for gas to expand into would mean that we'd all be dead if the sky was actually a vacuum, as claimed to be, with the assertion of outer space. Outer space is fake. You can't have gas pressure without a container. If the sky was a vacuum, the gas we breathe would fill that space. It's called entropy. Second law of thermodynamics debunks the assertion we have outer space, and in so doing debunks all claims of orbital motion, travels to different lights in the sky, moon landings. It's all debunked, because you can't travel through a second law of thermodynamics violation of natural law. Sky vacuum, because we'd all be dead here on the ground. The gas we breathe would expand in all directions into that space, and we wouldn't have any gas so we'd all be dead. Space is fake. Any evidence of the R value, that would be Earth radius.
I wanted to still rebut, unless Earth is kind of like Druidia. As a nice shield that can open.
That's an excellent rebuttal. Unless Earth is like Druidia or Narnia or one of the planets in Star Wars. Yes, excellent rebuttal. Thank you, Arwin. Can we move on? Any evidence of Earth radius, the R value? Don't all stand on ceremony.
But we're
Well-
just giving others a chance to talk, I think. Come on, Discord.
Now, Black Swan debunked it. There is no radius for a sphere.
Correct. You're going to need a geometric physical sphere edge horizon to derive the R value from, a la the Al-Biruni method, measuring the dip to the horizon and deriving R with trig. Well, you can only do that if you've got a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon, and as correctly identified by George, it's been debunked by the Black Swan. If Earth was a sphere, Earth, radius 3959, then every distance to that geometric horizon that they no longer have would be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, and the horizons beyond the geometric limitations of an Earth sphere radius 3959 as demonstrated in the imagery labelled Black Swan. Ergo, you can't measure the horizon to give you R anymore.
That Black Swan did a lot of damage, didn't it?
Did. So will the sextant in years to come. Age of the sextant, absolutely, completely justified. Any...
Yeah, it's
Go on.
just since you mentioned the sextant, I just wanted to say it's a great honor to be in the presence of the Grand Dragon of Angle O Sextant Supremacy, 10th man.
Agreed. Truly humbling experience having you take us through this example of how the Earth is only capable of being measured angularly in terms of the arc seconds of something that you've measured with respect to a flat baseline, how that can only be done on a flat Earth. It was nice that you held the most juicy cherry on top till last 10th in terms of not revealing the artificial / plumb line with a 90 degree to it to give you your horizontal, or bubble sextant example of not needing dip correction, i.e. no need to account for any sphericity if you're doing this with an artificial horizon or a bubble or whatever else you're using to establish horizontal, because all you're doing is establishing horizontal, and that's going to need a flat plane. Now, while we were debunking their Earth sphere by way of the 90 degree to the GP initially, when it actually boils down to brass tacks, they can't take any angle measurements on a sphere. You can't have a curved adjacent. And when they try and get around it by using artificial horizons, they're making it pure, flat geometry when they do so. And the horizon's completely irrelevant, including the dip that we'd have if we were on a sphere, which would negate this actually working. It's an epic proof of flat Earth. And to even assert a sphere in this argument for the sextant, you first got to start arguing how you're going to get away with measuring the angles on a flat surface first, which they must do. Also, further to this, shout out to Quantum Eraser for highlighting this, when the Blackpool Swan argument first surfaced, Conspiracy Cats justified his need to measure angles on a flat plane by claiming that he was giving us the flat plane initially. Incorrect. He could only acquire the angular size of anything, which he didn't actually measure, by doing it on a flat plane first. So where'd you get your curved adjacent angle measurement on a sphere? You don't. You'll just declare that you're going to give us a flat Earth first because you need it to measure an angle. Now, while I didn't recognise that that's exactly the same argument as this sextant argument back in the day when it was put forth by Cats, his begging the question of a flat Earth is absolutely necessary. So you can't assume a sphere when you're doing any of this. You've got to assume it's flat first. It's amazing. It's brilliant. I love it. So big shout out. I completely agree, Owen. Shout out to 10th. You're epic, mate. This is the best flat Earth proof ever.
When you remember, when I started studying it, I waited a year and then started slowly leaking it out. And the reason is because I had to go through in my own mind, wait a minute, this is so, if someone just sees what I'm looking at, like this is a conversation with myself I'm having here, of course. Man, if someone sees what I'm seeing here, they need straight lines. And it's in their books, they need straight lines. And yet they got these drawings of circles that should represent a three-dimensional sphere. I go, none of this makes any sense. They have a statement saying you need a 90 and at the same time showing a sphere image in representing a two-dimensional circle and it's supposed to get the observer to fall in line. So the more it came out, then I saw the artificial horizon and everything else. So all the arguments were had first within the small circle that we had. And then, of course, the ballers got hit by it, and then they just had to respond. And they said every argument that in practice I said in my head. And that's why I was shocked when they went against 90 so quickly. Because the minute they go against 90, you might as well throw out the Nautical Almanac. Because what is the Nautical Almanac? It's a book of 90s. It's telling you the zenith position of each of the 64 navigational stars that the Air Almanac uses. So if you're going to say get rid of 90, we don't need 90, you might as well get rid of navigation by the almanac. So that's big mistake. Then, of course, the big one, among other ones that they haven't fallen into yet, more to come, was the artificial horizon. And we covered this in the pre-show a little bit. So the whole point is that to dip or not to dip, that's a correction with the sextant.
Oh, that's perfect. To dip or not to dip, that's a correction. Oh, that's so epic.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so the whole point is that when you're on the
said that already.
when you're on the ocean surface, you're using the natural horizon, because a bubble doesn't do you well if the sea is rolling, and so you can't hold that bubble right. The artificial horizon in a tray is tough at sea as well. So the only thing that the mariner has at sea that's steady is the horizon. And then guess what? It's only for that you must minus height of eye. There is no height of eye minus for the artificial horizon or the bubble sextant, because you already have established horizontal. So let's reverse it. If there is no dip for those two methods and you still get the same numbers, and there is dip for the first one, the natural horizon on ocean, what is dip? Well, dip is your height above the ocean surface, and you got to get it horizontal. So what are they telling you? That it's flat. It's over. It's epic. So the only thing dragging on here is their denial of it. But I appreciate it. But this was something that I think the whole panel helped on as well. So let's keep it moving.
To dip or not to dip, that is the correction. Epic presentation. Thank you very much, 10th Man. It's been a wild journey in 2021. Moving on.
It's going to get wilder. There's more to come.
I agree. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
What is it?
107-year out-of-date mass attracting mass incorrectly ascribed to Newton by Newtonian gravity, or bending of conceptual fourth-dimensional space-time.
So, would you be able to prove something that is not a force but an effect and takes place in like a medium that isn't real? Could you vary and manipulate anything about that in order to establish scientific proof?
Well, let's have a try. If I talk about, in a slightly different context, the time dilation experience when walking through the wardrobe towards Narnia, would you say that that is something you could scientifically validate, Arwin?
No.
So, pseudo-Ramonian force space-time bending, that conceptual medium that no one's living in, is no different to trying to quantify scientifically or with physical evidence of time dilation when moving through the wardrobe. Conceptual mediums have no physical evidence to acquire.
Right. Unless, of course, somebody in the community decides to basically move on from Einstein gravity and go towards another conception of gravity and then try to prove that. I think that is being attempted in ways. I don't think anybody out there is really trying to get this scientific, this Einstein gravity proven. right? It's just math, and that's how they use it. They don't really try to physically prove that, right?
No, they reify it into the heavens, though. They claim that it's the maths that's describing space in space-time. So they claim it's a description of the heavens. I mean, the conceptual medium being used to describe it mathematically isn't a real medium. But that's absolutely how it's being utilised. We get a bit detached from that sometimes here because we just write it off so quickly. But what's it being used for? Well, it's claimed that we are part of space-time hurtling through curvy geodesics. Well, that's what's being claimed as our reality. The fact that it's a conceptual medium born out of the mind of Einstein is kind of irrelevant to the people who think that's their world. They've reified the mathematical conceptual medium of fourth space-time into their actual existence. That's just reification.
And quite surreal, too.
Mad when you think about it from the outside, i.e. us. It is quite bonkers, but there we go, that's the world we live in. That's the Western worldview. Any scientific evidence of gravity? Bearing in mind it's a conceptual four-space-time medium being bent.
No, that could never happen then, right? Gravity could move on in what is accepted, or what it is accepted to be, could move on in the public's mind and then basically be reformulated again after Einstein into something else. But that still would have to fit somehow, right? I think some people out there are kind of attempting it.
No, not right. In the same way as Newtonian gravity's been maintained and is still claimed to work at the small scale, it doesn't matter that it doesn't work. It's in a completely different geometry. Euclidean 3-space versus pseudo-Riemannian 4-space is completely different geometry. It doesn't work. You can't back-engineer one into the other. It doesn't work. Does it matter? Do they still teach it to kids? Yeah, they sure do. It doesn't work with Einsteinian. So you're saying that the new layer of bullshit, the quantum gravity, probably exists already. It's going to have to work with the Einsteinian. No, doesn't have to. Just make up a new story.
Right, exactly. So once that is manifested, would it still be a legitimate question to keep referencing Einstein and Newtonian gravity, right? That's obviously undone. But if there is some new form and it's almost like a joke to even imagine that they would actually lay down a viable hypothesis for their new gravity. But what if they would? What then?
Well, what then? We'd ask them what their independent and dependent variable was. More importantly, what they're observing to occur. So if you're saying the phenomena isn't bending space-time or mass attracting mass, it's the new hotness of XYZ gravity, well then, okay, if you're going to answer the following question, which is any valid hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology or astrophysics, you're going to need A, a phenomenon to study, and B, an independent variable to vary to see if you can cause the effect if you take that forth to experimental stages. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology or astrophysics?
Well, not yet. Maybe never. It doesn't seem to be in their best interest, the people that actually pretend to be scientists in that field, to really come up with hypotheses. They're more interested in just story building so far.
That's why we ask. They don't have any. It used to be the whole body of science proved you're on a sphere, people. Now there's no science. In fact, if we point out that there's no science for a globe, we're told that science doesn't prove anything. It's pathetic. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
What is it?
I don't know, Neil.
Neil?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, he knows I usually ask.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
Well, if we're going to establish a distance to something, it would first be handy to establish that or some kind of a proof that it is an object in the first place.
I can't give you that, I'm sorry. You'll have to beg the question and then I'll have to pull it apart afterwards. I'm not going to do it for you.
How can we do that? How can we find out if it's a physical object? There's got to be something we could do. I'm tired of this.
Well, we could do tests, right? Icarus test. Let's fly towards it. Let's see what happens. There's no guarantee there's going to be a result of tangibility, But who knows? Maybe there will be some kind of apparent size change in the approach. Maybe there are signs it is sort of
I think this is an
in a literal spot. We don't
idea.
know.
I'm going to start a GoFundMe to raise funds to send Darwin to the sun.
Hi,
Sure
Can
idea.
we make his,
unmanned.
if we make his wings out of wax and feathers, will the same result happen with Icarus?
No, I'm going to make my wings out of adamantium.
Yeah, there's not enough air pressure probably at that height to actually be able to utilize wings for lift at that point.
Oh, they're using helicopters on Mars, man. You got this.
Yeah, but
No,
they
they're
have to
not.
use a rocket to get it there, though.
No, they're not using helicopters on Mars. Mars is a light in the sky, and in order to make that claim work, you'd have to travel through a second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum to take the helicopter, to then enter through an atmosphere that's not dispersing from Mars into the sky vacuum that you've just traversed to utilise the very thin air with the helicopter blades, as they don't disperse into the sky vacuum that you've just travelled through. So nobody's travelling to Mars. There are no rovers on Mars.
How would you find out the distance to the sun? How would you find out like where the light is? How do you find out where the location of light is?
Take it away, Arwin. Tell him where it is.
It's over there.
There you go.
And the way to establish whether it has some kind of a physical or localized nature, well, approach is the first thing you should do, right? Because if it is an apparent thing or an actual physical thing in a literal Euclidean position somewhere over Earth, well, then there should be some perspective influences, because when you approach objects in literal location, their angular size increases as you approach at a steady rate, for example. So
Does that
those
happen
would
with the
be
sun?
signals
Just
to
to
look
clear
out
that
for.
up. Good point. Does that happen with the sun?
Not as far as I've seen, but maybe. But I haven't seen a lot of super high up footage, right?
As far
About
as we
that.
can,
Couple of balloons.
as far as we can ascertain, as far as it is apparent, it moves as you move towards it.
Yes, on ground level especially. But yeah, that seems to be the typical trend of its behavior. But
With one
yeah,
exception.
who knows?
But with one exception, which is at the sometimes reified point on the ground described as the equator, or anywhere around that region where you can have the sun at your zenith. So in a certain band of area of land, the sun, and this also applies to the navigational stars, there is a point that from any vantage point, as you look at that position at that point in time, I must add, it is directly above that particular position of land. Now that's universally true, regardless of where you're looking at it from. Hence, well, in terms of what we've described it with the sextant, when you look at the area of equal altitude, which I'm glad now it's been a few months we can actually start detailing this sort of stuff, anywhere on that circle, when you draw out your first circle, is where you could potentially be. But it's also where that star would also still simultaneously be located at, anywhere around that circle. Now, further to that, you could expand that circle out further. As long as you don't get to the point where that star at its GP is maybe 15 degrees above the horizon itself, you can expand and expand and expand that circle. But anywhere around that circle, you could have a ring of people all looking at the star at the same position, as long as it's at the same time, all looking at it above the same location on the ground. Now, this for me is the next step of fascination. It's like, okay, this gives us a better idea how they've transposed the heavens onto the land and then given us maps so we can actually work our way around, but not with the land being plotted out correctly, with the stars and their movements above their GP. Now, that's something that's going to progress in terms of our understanding of how we've potentially been deceived, and may, or may not, help us find out how the land's actually orientated in the truest senses of the word. We might get there, we might not. It doesn't make any difference to the argument, but it's still an interesting situation to find yourself in when you know that piece of information about the GP of the sun or any stars at any given point in time. So there we go. That's my ramble over. I don't know if 10th Man's got anything to add to that. Feel free.
I do. What 10th man go?
All right. That's basically longitude. The sun is at that longitude, which is a straight line on a map. And at 15 degrees later, it's an hour away at another longitude line. And in between, you measure it in time, in minutes. So the sky is a sky map, much like the EQ Mount Telescope is a sky map coordinate system, whereas the Alt-AS is a horizontal coordinate system. So if you're going to put a grid lines on the sky, like Stellarium does, they curve them, of course, but we know that's not true because there's no R. There's no R to this Earth. And when a sun or a star is directly above the Earth somewhere, that's its zenith, that's its 90. Well, you can't say that's the highest point that star is of that day and assign a 90 to it without the baseline being straight as well, or you can't say it's a 90. So the whole point is it's on the flat plane. Those are longitude, latitude lines like the Mercator map has. They're not arcs, they're not curves, and it's moving. We're not moving, it's moving, and it hits another longitude line and another, and in between longitude lines. And that's why they say longitude in degrees and hours and minutes, because if you're lost between 50 and 51 degrees and the Coast Guard's looking for you, they need a little bit more exactness. So you say 50 and 20 or 50 and 30 minutes and 2 seconds. Oh, so you're halfway. So you're just a half away. You're halfway between that 1 degree. And it could be 70. It could be 70 minutes. It could be 30 seconds. So it's a way of pinpointing you on a grid. And you can't have straight lines on a curveball.
Owen?
Well, that was such a detailed thing. Like, yeah. That kind of muted me. Great, though. Very detailed. Now, I was going to more point at just my curiosity of the nature of the sun, right? Would it be possible at some point with the Icarus project to establish like whether there is an actual Euclidean point in space above us that is like a focal point of the energy? Would that be that there is some kind of energy apparition there that you could touch and get burned by? Or is it like just a location that is the central emanation point for the light manifestation, and that there wouldn't be any effect there, that it would be a blank spot?
Okay,
Right?
the answer is either, probably neither, and you put in the cart before the horse because you're just speculating about it, what it might be. Now, if you were to, if you were to be talking to Adam, he'd say, well, you've got to do that first. You're going to apply a certain amount of inductive logic prior to going forth and experimenting. But in this case, what you're actually studying, you're deciding for explanations prior to anything happening. It's just pie in the sky conjecture.
Well, it's kind of my visionary predictions of what the experience might be like. I'm basically, going way ahead, right? But it's something that I do to test, because what if we do eventually, somebody does this, will it turn out the way that I've envisioned it, right? Or will it be even more holographic and that it just always keeps on bending away and that the sun is always at a certain apparent distance somewhere?
Okay,
right?
okay. You're justifying your pie in the sky with a false dichotomy fallacy. So
sorry, I'm sorry, it's not scientific inquiry. I'm just really curious about this.
No, I know, but you did say test.
Oh God.
Well, what do you want?
I want to be able to say test without a direct scientific implications.
All right, when we're
I'm
talking
not
about
saying experiments.
we're talking about, let's get it straight. We're talking about the nature of the world, the physics, the physical nature of the world. That's physics, but you want to be able to contextualize that in a nice magic word that is test. Contextually, definitely an experiment when we're talking about this. You want to be able to just get away with using that and then pie in the sky conjecture like the heliocentrists have deceived us with. Never going to happen.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not a physics test. It's an observation test.
It's not a test then.
Going there, seeing what happens.
It's not a test. In this context, that's not a test.
What do you call it then?
Well, you could call it observational science if you were a quasi-scientist trying to But that's what they do. I'm just telling you how
That's
it
a
is.
straw man.
It's not
What
straw
should
man.
I call it if I can't call it a test? I don't know. I don't have any words left to designate it, right? I can't call it science. I can't call it an experiment. Now I can't call it a test. Well, what should I call it then?
Looking at stuff.
can say-
Looking
I
at
mean,
stuff.
because
that's not
Sorry,
exactly what they
looking
did
at
to
it.
find the
Just what it
distance
is.
anyway.
Looking at it, and then coming up with a little story. And your story might be right. You know, I'm not saying it's wrong. You might turn out to be right, Arwin, which is what you want to hear. That's what you told me. You're like, well, I want to find out if that ends up being right. Anything's possible.
I'm just looking. No, but I gotta call the process something because it's more than just looking at it and thinking. Like I'm reasoning out, like actual approaching, like doing something physically in the field to observe it better and to get a closer look as to its nature.
All
Right?
fine.
I don't
That's
know
all
what
fine.
else to call it besides a test.
That's all fine, what you've just described, but that isn't what you're doing. Saying it's holographic or a point source or all of your speculation and then talking about tests is the issue, as opposed to you saying, well, I just want to do some observations of it. Well, no, that's not what you were justifying. I'm taking umbrage with your speculation followed by talk of tests. You've taken umbrage with that because you want to be able to contextualise speculation with the same magic trick that we're deceived by. Now, you may not like that I'm making an example of you with this, but that's tough. What Arwen's doing is
I
he's
think
utilising the...
2022 will bring us more on the sun.
What Arwen's doing is he's utilising the same magic trick that we've been deceived by. You know, in terms of the speculation, you can lend weight to it by saying, I want to figure out how I can do tests on this after the declaration that this isn't going to be in any way scientific. But we're contextualised in physics. So when you're talking about something as important to life itself as the sun, we're definitely talking about physics. It's definitely a phenomenon. Sorry, Arwen. Don't take it personally. On the bright side, we have concluded the housekeeping questions today.
Well, at least you got something out of this, son.
Absolutely.
If we can't prove the sun is physical, how can we put it into the realm of physics?
In terms of scientific validity being offered to the sun, there isn't any. It doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that you can't formulate a hypothesis based on what that phenomena is caused by. But who's trying? Who's doing that? Well, nobody. But who's claiming experimental validity to their just so stories, other than Arwen? Well, heliocentrists.
Hey, I'm not doing that.
You are.
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm
no.
struggling semantically.
Okay, it's
I'm not
okay.
claiming
You're not. You're right.
experimentation.
It's the preemptive aspect of what you're about to do when you speculate about doing tests in the future based on your just so stories. There you go. Good summary by me. Nathan is ace.
That's better.
Is the sun a light?
No, it's a dark.
No, it's a light. It's a light in the sky.
How do you know it's a light?
My view on this is it's a light in the sky. I derive heat from it. It moves. We don't move. I don't know any more than that. I don't know the substance. I don't know anything more than that.
How do we know it's light, though?
What is
That's pretty
light? What
obvious.
define light? Sun fits into that definition. There you go. That's why.
Because what I'm
Because we
thinking
can
about
see.
is that that test where the knower knows the path of the light. And how does that test go again? Can someone reiterate that quickly to me?
Which test? Say again.
Knowing which path experiment.
The light, the test where you like the knower knows the path of the light, and then it goes to that path. What? I need that clarified for me.
You want me to summarise what happens in the double slit experiment?
Yeah, if it's not too long.
Sure. You fire a particle or a stream of particles, one after the other, at a photographic plate through a choice of two different slits that it can follow, or two different paths, if you will. Now, if you don't know which path it's going to go through when each one's fired, you end up with what's known as a probability distribution on the wall behind on the photographic plate or sensor. So you have a series of bars. Now that is to say that you fire one, just to keep it simple in my explanation, and as it travels through one or other of the two slits, it might arrive on the photographic plate behind at position 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. And then you can stack up a likelihood, how likely, what is the probability of it hitting at position 2. And you can say it's a 1 in whatever chance based on, you know, how many hits you've had prior to it. You can calculate the probability of it hitting at position 2. So then you fire, and then you see where it hits. But lo and behold, it hits at position 3, actually the most likely one, the one in the middle to hit. So you go, okay, I'm going to fire another one. I think it's going to hit position 3 because that's the most likely and that's where the last one hit. And lo and behold, it hits number 5. Because what you're doing is you don't know which one it's going through, and as a result, it's splitting up into what's known as a diffraction pattern, an interference pattern. And that interference pattern is mathematically quantifiable as something called an interference distribution, right? So that probability... a probability distribution. That probability of where it's going to hit is the diffraction. Okay? So with that being said, if you know which path it goes through, so you've got some sort of detector positioned over one of the slits, i.e. if you've only got two, if you see it go through, you know it went through the one you saw it go through, and if you don't see it go through, you know it went through the other. So you've got one detector, and at that point, the moment that you know which path it's going through, it stops being a probability and actualizes into a line behind one slit and a line behind the other slit. In other words, if it goes through path 1 and you know it went through path 1, it will hit behind path 1. And if it hits path 2, it's because it went through path 2 and you knew it was going to because it went through and you knew it was going to. So in other words, knowing which path collapses the probability distribution. It stops being it might hit there, but it might also hit there. We don't know. To, I know it will hit there. So knowledge of the which path collapses the probability distribution. That's the end result of that experiment. So to have actualization, that's wave function collapse or actualization, a line of dots behind a slit, you've got to know which slit it went through. And to know, you've got to have an antecedent, which is a knower. So to have the knowledge, you need a knower. So that's it. There you go. There's the not very brief, not very concise, probably a little bit inaccurate summary of the double slit from me, who's never done it. Hope that was good.
Yeah, well, I'll have to like re-listen to what you just said and like see if I understand completely. But what if that's how the sun works as well? Like we know the path, we think we know the path that it's on, and it's a light just like that test. And just because we're the knower of it, we determine the path of where it is. That's what I'm kind of thinking. Maybe it doesn't make any sense to anybody else.
No, it does. It does on a sense if you have part of reality that you didn't know already. So acquisition of knowledge isn't the individual there and then necessarily. So on the fringes of reality, if you will, if somebody comes along and, you know, takes a video of a tree at the edges of reality, then so long as that is accessible, then a knower could have that information. Therefore, the tree still exists. However, if nobody knows and nobody's seen it and there's no documented evidence of it ever existing, it doesn't exist anymore. It's merely a probability. So you have to have, in other words, to have stuff, that would be physical stuff or informational stuff, there's always going to be a prerequisite of a knower first. It always starts there. To have information, therefore, to collapse wave function, to have actualization of anything, you need a knower first. Which answers the ontological primitives. Where did it all begin? Well, it began with a knower. That's where it all starts. You can't have any of this without having the information. You can't have the information without a knower.
Gets a little complicated there.
Only because I didn't explain the ontological primitives. I mean, I'm not going to get into them now. But if you want to know whether we were started out of a big bang, nature creating everything out of nothing, that would be a first law of thermodynamics violation. Or whether or not we had a Noah at the beginning, an intelligent designer, well, I've just told you the answer to that question.
Well, I never personally needed even like quantum mechanics to know that, to realize that, because of the nature of entropy, right? That was
Well, I
like the
did.
first pointer to me.
Well, I did. I didn't want there to be a god. And then QE shoved quantum mechanics under my nose, and there was no escaping it. There was no getting away from it. It started with a Noah. That's how this all began.
All right.
Why
Yeah,
did
and
you
if
ask,
wanna
just out of
describe
interest?
reality,
Just before we go on, why did you ask? There must have been a reason behind you asking about the double slits, like almost nothing to do with any of the housekeeping or anything. So why did you ask?
Just because we're talking about the sun and if it's real or not, and I thought about how it's a light, and if light behaves bizarre in a double slit experiment, and we can't actually like assess whether it's tangible or not.
Okay,
Maybe
I can get. Yeah, okay, I got you
acting
now.
like that way in a macro way.
Sure, I can give you an example
yeah.
of how that does actually occur. So if you can see diffraction patterns, you've only got to have the same sort of scenario occur, and that's easy to replicate in nature. Something travelling through something and then having an option to travel something right next to it. You could imagine this through the leaves of trees is the easiest way I can give it you as a natural phenomena. There's going to be plenty of diffraction, that's interference patterns, through the gaps in the leaves in the trees as light travels through. Well, they're diffracting. Now, in the most simplest terms, you just look at it and go, that's a nice pattern. The light's diffracting. Nothing really special about it, because that's just what light does. Okay, light diffracts. But then you get to somebody, admittedly, much, much further down the line in terms of experimental study of light. They get to the stage where they go, why does light diffract? Now, I'm sure when that person asked that question based on the natural phenomena of light diffraction, they didn't realise necessarily that at the end of it, they'd realise that God is waiting for you at the bottom of this cup. Maybe they did, I don't know. But ultimately speaking, that's the only conclusion, because knowledge of the which path collapses the wave function. Well, if knowledge has a prerequisite of a Noah, then that actualisation, transition from probability to reality, takes knowledge, takes a Noah. That's it. That's amazing as it is, but as succinct as I can give it you on my second attempt. There is a God. It's amazing stuff. Go on, sorry.
No, just saying you were very concise.
As I say, I didn't want this to be the case. That there's a certain aspect to the nihilism that is offered to you when you go to globe Earth faith. That means that you've got that I don't give a crap attitude about everything, because you're a tiny little speck of dust in an infinitely expanding soup of second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum. You're just so insignificant. It's just, who cares? And that's what's offered to you when you don't realise that without you as a Noah yourself personally, who can influence and literally change reality, it's within your means to do stuff in this reality, right? You just got to do it. Yeah? And that's because you're a Noah, and therefore you have an influence on reality. But that's so tangible and so simplistic that most people don't realise that. We had a discussion the other day about people dreaming about things manifesting into reality, and it's like, no amount of me dreaming about a Lamborghini is going to make one happen. It's going to take a lot of blood, sweat and tears, but I'm capable of that because I physically exist as an entity and I'm a Noah. So I can collapse wave functions, goddamn. Excuse my blasphemy.
Well, it's interesting that about all this, and that in the Bible it says that God is light. That kind of gives validity to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
well, see, that was my point though. Is knowing something can affect reality, right? That's still knowing is an aspect of the mind. So your mind is changing reality.
Yeah, your mind is the starting process. But when you say changing reality, yeah, let's think of a negative example, just so it hits home with a bit more drama. You've got a feuding wife and husband, and the wife decides that the diffraction pattern that is the probability of the tyres on the husband's car being shred is going to be actualised today. You know, that's within the capabilities of her manifesting that into reality in a very literal sense. Or planting a beautiful tree. Or whatever you want to do in life.
But if you don't believe you can do that, you'll never try.
Exactly, but the belief starts in terms of being a knower and recognising opportunity. Now, I'm doing a very crude job of paralleling opportunity with diffraction patterns, but ultimately speaking, you're not on the fringes of reality. So you're never going to manifest something into reality just because you're there, and it formerly existed only as a probability distribution. You know, we're not experiencing that reality. But it might mean, God, this is getting deep and live, that on what we are told as lie, the fringes of reality with a bloody ice wall or a constantly going around in circles globe, maybe that is the fringes of reality. Maybe things that didn't exist and a need for more land or whatever exists beyond the reality we know. And somebody's put the kibosh on manifesting more of reality. You know, I don't know. I don't know why the limitations have been put in place. And if you try and find that out from the people who put the limitations in place, they're not going to tell you because they're liars. They're just going to tell you more lies.
Well, we don't know what we don't know, and we can, of course, speculate that things could manifest once we know what we don't know.
Hold on.
Yep.
No, what you don't know can't contradict what you know, else you didn't know what you know. It's a law of the non-contradiction.
I don't know about that.
No, that's correct. It's the law of non-contradiction.
Oh, I was just joking.
Do you know what you know you were joking, though?
Yes,
How do you know?
because I decided to make a joke about
If
it.
you decide it's a joke, is it funny?
I don't know.
I
Is
know.
it?
Wow. This deja vu moment right here.
All right. Well, now that we've discussed that, can we talk about motion and how what we perceive as motion is just a conceptual relationship within the mind of God?
Right, did you say motion is a conceptual relationship in the mind of God? What the hell are you babbling about?
That sounds very pseudo-Ramonian.
Yeah, I was trying to wedge it in there, but it ain't gonna fit.
Yeah, God doesn't fit in that model.
Oh, he fits in any model, really. I mean, you could put him anywhere.
But pseudo-Ramonian force space was not designed for that. It's just like a sub-physical reality.
Heaven.
Dictionary.
Oh, was that someone from Discord? Go ahead, whoever it was. Or maybe not.
No, that was John breaking up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, I said heaven. He said sub-physical reality. And I said, oh, yeah, like heaven.
Okay, what's heaven?
If you think so.
What's that?
Well, it's I guess it'd be when you stop knowing.
How do you know you'll stop knowing?
It would be a violation of the law of non-contradiction for me to not die.
But how do you know you'll stop knowing after you die?
Right, so you'll have to go somewhere.
Maybe? We don't know.
I'm pretty sure that death sort of negates the prerequisite of knowing things anymore, Arwin. I don't know why this is an issue.
Well, you wouldn't be able to prove it, now would you? Even if you did.
Yeah, reaffirming the
You don't
point
have a
even
physical
more.
body to do it.
Yeah, that
As
kind of
it
backs.
pertains to the physical body, yes.
But do we know things because we're physical? Or is the knowing separate from the physical, right? That's the
No, it's
question.
not separate.
How do you know?
Look, unless you want to start getting into Descartes' philosophy, this is... Why are we doing this again? I already asked that once.
I don't know. We were talking about knowing and it got all philosophical, so I'm just playing around.
Well, we were asked about the sun.
It's semi-serious.
We were asked about the sun in the context of the double slit experiment. That's how this conversation began. Up until this dragged out end, it was a really good conversation. Whoever brought it up, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why there's any problem with the sun. I mean, it's something that we have observed most. Well, I don't know about you guys in England, but in California, I see it almost every day.
Sorry, wait. Someone's saying there is a problem with the sun.
Who's saying there's a problem?
I don't know, but it's something I should definitely change my alert level. I'm only at orange at the moment.
Well, you should move out of England so you can see it more often.
Sorry, who's saying there's a problem? If there's a problem and I need to be worried about it.
It's the solar flares, man. They're so dangerous, and our magnetic field of the ball Earth can't handle it anymore. And
holy crap,
wait,
that does sound terrifying. Tell me more. This is definitely going to raise the alert level.
Yeah, well, it's still very much heliocentric cosmology based, that notion. So
look, all I need to know is how terrified I need to be.
Level orange.
I'm already at orange.
DEFCON 4. DEFCON 4.
Look, just tell me what it is and how scared I need to be of it, and then I can get on with my day.
You don't need to be scared of it.
I need to be very, very scared.
No, you don't. Or they'll tax you.
I don't know. That tax might help the fear go away.
It's just pennies on the dollar at the end of the day, but no, it's another ploy.
I could be a politician. For just a few cents on the dollar, you could relieve yourself of all this fear that we've generated in society currently. Sounds good to me.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Why do we need quantum mechanics to know that the probability disappears once you know? Isn't that like a Dewey moment, or it's like an axiom? Of course, once you know what's going to happen, obviously the probability disappears.
Yeah, I completely
I don't
agree.
know.
No,
I don't understand
agree.
why you need quantum mechanics for that.
I agree. It seems obvious. Nobody's disagreeing with you.
Okay,
Nobody's disagreeing.
Oh, okay.
Unless someone wants to disagree. You're not. But with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you smashed the super chat. I think 808 said he loves these kind of shows, except for the dragged out ending, I'm sure. Stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all on the next video.
What a lovely day!